So I'm here today with Dorlande Charles. She's a middle school social studies teacher at Powell Academy in the Chicago Public Schools. And she's been someone who's been using the civic online reasoning curriculum from the Stanford History Education Group. And we're super lucky to be able to chat with her about her experience. So thanks for joining us, Dorlande.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be here to speak with everyone today. Can't wait to get started.
Can you tell us about what kinds of assumptions or skills that your students come into your class with as it relates to internet search and search literacy? Like, what do they know before you get started teaching them about this?
Okay, so with my eighth graders, they knew number one that, or well, they assumed that Wikipedia could not be a trusted or a credible source. After that, they probably, I believe, for them, they thought that the internet is not much so of a tool to use in terms of doing research. They didn't have that background knowledge. And so they pretty much use the internet for social media like TikTok and Instagram and Twitter, but not to do actual real research. So they came in like a blank slate. So that was good for me.
So you've got these students and they don't know much about the internet, about using it as a research tool. How did you get started introducing them to the ideas of civic online reasoning?
Okay, perfect. So the number one thing we had to do is I put together an essential question: who is behind the information, right? So that was my very first lesson, to get them to understand that there are multiple people who are filtering through information. Sometimes it could be sponsored, it could be an ad, there could be a hidden agenda. So we had to pretty much unpack why would it be important to have an unbiased or a biased person feeding them information through the internet. So that was pretty much lesson number one for me.
That's great. And then how do you sequence your use of the civic online reasoning lessons throughout your curriculum? Did you take a whole week and do them all at once, or do you sort of space them out throughout a semester or a year?
It was easier for me to space them out so that they can pretty much digest the information. So as we're going through the unit, it took roughly about maybe 2 to 3 weeks. It was only 5 lessons, but it took us about 2 to 3 weeks. I wanted them to practice on their own or practice, in the classroom with different assignments that I gave them. So the sequence that I first used, day one was the introduction to the civic online reasoning. Day two was intro to lateral reading. Day three was lateral versus vertical reading, and then day four was lateral reading with Wikipedia. That by far was my favorite. Most of my students was like, wait a minute, Miss Charles, I thought we weren't allowed to use Wikipedia. So having to pretty much unlearn that. And then day five was click restraint. That's my second favorite as well. Knowing that the very first thing you see on Google may not be the one I want you to use. Go ahead and continue to scroll down the links a little bit more to dig into more resources to find out, information for me.
And then how would your students end up using Wikipedia throughout the rest of the semester or the rest of the year? Or
Well, number one, that would typically be their favorite. So that would be the first step, right? That's the first website that they would go to. And then there's other websites, like, for example, Snoops. There's other political organizations that have websites in place that will be pretty much a fact checker for them to say, okay, well, it checks out here. So let me go ahead and open up another tab. So that's the difference between lateral reading versus vertical reading, right? When you go from one tab and open several others, to go ahead and see, well, is that information succinct everywhere across the board? And if it's not, then we know it's not credible. We cannot use it as a source.
um, what kinds of activities could you do in the rest of the year because you had invested some time in doing these 5 lessons? Like, how are your students sort of more prepared to do research, or what other kinds of new activities could you do the rest of the year because they had, this new learning and this new training?
Election season is coming up. So, as a civic social studies teacher, we're going to have to then compare and contrast different platforms from the different candidates. So, for example, if Joe Biden, the presidential candidate for the Democrats, is saying that that we have enough money to provide education for every single 18-year-old, right? In the United States of America, I would have to have my students go then and do additional research to see, you know what, can that be done? Which organization, which federal organization will provide the money? How would that money be dispersed? What is considered in America? Is it just Americans? Do you have to be a citizen? What would be the ramifications? What if I'm 18 but I'm not a citizen? Can I still get that money? So I think just going from there, right? I think that would be a great start for the students. So I'm excited to see during election season, that would be the perfect time to fact check the candidate.
That's great. So we can empower our students in that fact checking work. As they were learning these skills of lateral reading and click restraint, were there things that were particularly hard for students? Like what were the most challenging pieces for them to learn, or things that you felt like you had to go back to a couple of times, either during the lessons or throughout the year?
Click restraint was a little bit difficult for some of them because I believe um, we live in a fast-paced microwave society where I want the answer right now. And so some of them did not have that patience to say, you know what, maybe I need to go through 3 or 4 different websites. Maybe I need to look up some definitions to then get me to the right link. So that was a little bit difficult for some of my 8th graders where they wanted to go to that first website and say, aha, I got it. Now I know the answer, but that might not be true.
Um, as you have a new year coming up, and you'll be doing much more remote learning, some hybrid learning, have you thought about how you're planning on adapting the civic online reasoning curriculum to COVID times and remote learning and those kinds of things?
Yes. So I've been reading a couple different options that I thought was kind of cool. I did love the fact that with the online reasoning piece, there are some graphics, some infographics that I would love to use to kind of dispel some information that's being put out there. I definitely want to do a mask versus non-mask campaign. Can we trust it? What kind of mask are we allowed to use? Can we trust the cloth mask, although it's used recommended by the CDC? So I thought that would be kind of cool because we do have some anti-mask people out there in America who don't think that it's important or it's necessary, or I'm okay if you're wearing your mask and I'm not. I can still be safe because you're covered. So I want to try to dispel that a little bit and have them do some research to see, well, what is the CDC actually saying? What is the federal government actually saying regarding the requirements from wearing the mask? And can that actually flatten the curve? What would be some additional steps that we may need to take outside of just the mask? So that'd be kind of cool.
So it sounds like you've got your eye on a bunch of really important current events that are coming up this year about how we continue to manage or mismanage the pandemic, the elections coming up, and because your students have more experience with searching online, with identifying who are credible sources and who's behind the information on the internet, that's going to give you and them more confidence as they dig into these various research enterprises in your course.
Yes, and I'm excited. I think that the biggest thing that I learned with my students is that if they don't trust me, right, as a facilitator, they're not going to trust themselves. So sometimes I have to motivate them and push them a little bit more and say, "You can do it. I think you'll find it." I noticed towards the end, I started to have students go into deeper rabbit holes to the point that they wanted to call some of these organizations, some of these people to say, hey, I noticed this, and you know what? I think you should change your, your operations a little bit to be safe for the environment. For example, it's interesting. There was one particular lesson when we had to identify if one charity organization, was credible or real. So then some of my students, when they found out that it was actually real, the young man, he earned awards and actually had a real organization, an LLC. You can find it on the internet. They saw that he took pictures with the prince from the UK. They were like, okay, I think we like him, but you know what? how can we actually help the people in Africa in his charity? So now my students are trying to be not only civically engaged, but they're more aware of issues that's happening, not just in Chicago, not just in America, but now globally, right? So outside of our country. So that made me feel, as a social studies teacher, just excited for their growth overall. They were pumped up.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Do you have advice for new teachers who are adopting the civic online reasoning curriculum? Just things that you wish you had done differently when you got started, or things that were particularly helpful when you started working with your students?
Take your time. Do not rush. Do it with fidelity. Put together some essential questions. The main idea, what is it that you want your students to know at the end of the unit? Um, Whether it be that you want the students to know lateral reading versus vertical reading, right? Strategies. Make sure that you ask questions, right? I love that in my room, my students, I create a safe space where they can actually speak their minds. So if it's a controversial topic that you want them to actually delve into and do more research, provide that space where they can actually speak their mind and say, you know what, based off my opinion, I noticed X, Y, and Z. But however, you know what, maybe I changed my mind of how I viewed that particular topic or subject area because of the additional research. So allow growth. Also, all of our students are not at the same pace. All of our students, we may think of because of their ages that they live in this digital society, that they know how to do certain things, but that may not be the case. So be patient with them, work through it. Definitely be comfortable with technology. I will definitely say that is to a fault sometimes, where we as educators, we like the old school method, right? We like to go and do research in the library instead of using Google or other search engines. So take your time with it and you will see the growth. At the end is that aha moment where you initially say something and you see students automatically start going on the computer and looking it up. Also, what I did love as well, that when I started to teach other topics in the classrooms, my students didn't take my information for face value. They wanted to do additional research to actually figure out, well, what was the root cause, okay, of that particular issue we're talking about? What other voices are being silenced that I'm not discussing in the classroom currently? So they themselves are being empowered to do additional research. Phenomenal. But you have to take your time and work through it.
Yeah, it sounds like something that if you invest in for a while, it really pays dividends. For you had seventh graders last year, and they're becoming eighth graders this year. Do you have ideas of how you want to revisit some of these ideas to help them go into even greater depth? Are there particular sort of search skills beyond lateral reading and click restraint that you're hoping to spend time on with the students who you have for a second year, who you already had a chance to introduce these ideas to?
I think with my current, with my new seventh graders that I'm going to have, I need to more work on their critical thinking skills. I think we are not really taking that time to have our students think on their own and then have them, and then not have me say, no, it is incorrect. I want them to research and figure out why the answer may not be appropriate for the question that I have. So, more so working on their critical thinking skills this year for my seventh graders, that's going to be important. I think we pretty much spoon feed kids at the K-5 level. And then when they come to middle school and then they get a teacher like me, it's like, whoa, you want me to do a lot at a short amount of time, but I have to do that foundational work with them.
And I guess part of my question too is you have some seventh graders who you did the civic online reasoning with last year. Is that right?
I have no, so my eighth graders
Okay.
that I did the civic reasoning, they are now freshmen in
Okay,
high
they're gone. All right, all right.
school.
Okay,
Yes,
I
they're freshmen
misunderstood
in
the
high
premise.
school now. Yes.
But so will you do civic online reasoning with both your seventh graders and your eighth graders this coming year?
I typically do it with eighth graders because I would have them for 2 years.
Yep.
However, because now we're doing this push with having our kids to know how to use the internet wisely now that we're in remote learning, what I want to do is craft something that's at that seventh grade level that is enriched, however, is at their pace for them. So for example, I know that one of the things that I want my students to be able to do will be learning why sources of information is important and how to analyze information based on that source, why that is important.
That's great. All right. So as there's more remote learning happening, you're feeling like these skills are even increasingly important. I mean, especially since a bunch of the work that students may be doing is gonna be in their homes and not in a classroom with you to sort of look over their screen and check in with them and make sure that they're heading on the right track and those kinds of things. That's great. Well, Dorlan Charles, it's been fabulous talking with you. I hope you have a terrific school year coming up.
Thank you so much. I love the fact that you guys are offering this. I did look at the syllabus a little bit, so I'm excited for you guys. The fact checker is definitely my favorite, so that first unit is going to be perfect. And then the third one, being able to just evaluate the different types of evidence, that would be good as well. I think for us in my classroom, I use the primary and secondary resources a lot. So having them to compare and contrast whether if it's a person who is speaking versus counts and a tales, right? That's been passed down that may have fudged a little bit, right? We're not sure if that's credible. If I can tell, so I definitely love the fact that you guys are going to be evaluating different types of evidence. I'm excited for you guys. I hope you guys have an awesome year as well, being remote, and please be safe.